So welcome everyone to this free Friday webinar series. Today we are going to talk about cybersecurity. This webinar is automatically captioned and you can use the CC button in Zoom to get the captions. The webinar is being recorded and will be published on our YouTube channel after the webinar. Your microphone is being muted to avoid any background noise, and the setup of these webinars is that we will share a short presentation and then there will be a Q&A. So if you would like to ask questions to the speakers, then please use the Q&A function. If you use the chat, I cannot guarantee that I will see the questions. My name is Susanna Loren, and we will talk today about the cybersecurity and accessibility. And my colleague Sarah Kjellstrand will kick off with this presentation.
Yeah, so I'm a research strategist here at the Funka Foundation. And as you may know, we are doing auditing, we do training, we do research projects, but we are also involved in standardization. So the background to this webinar is that we have been involved in helping the Sensenelec GTC 13 Working Group 9, who are now doing the preparing the standards that are supporting the Cyber Resilience Act. And from this, we have been started to think about what is the connection between accessibility and cybersecurity. So what is really the rationale behind working together on accessibility and cybersecurity? Well, it's simply put that everybody should feel safe and included when you're using digital products and when you are on the web or using an app. And sometimes there's this talk about a clash between accessibility and security, because if you have too strict security measures, then it may exclude persons who are, for example, using assistive technology, who may not be able to use the cybersecurity measures. But then on the other hand, if you then remove the measures and make it easier to access it with assistive technology, then you are exposing people to vulnerabilities. So instead of seeing this as something with an inherent conflict, it's better to work together to do accessibility and security by design, so that everybody can access the information without anyone who are not authorized also looking at your data at the same time. So in practice, the accessibility considerations start really with the concept of reasonable foreseeable use. So what is that? It's a concept that is quite often talked about both in cybersecurity, in accessibility, and other similar standardization and technology development contexts. Well, if you have a product, or if you have, in this case, a security measure, you may have an intended use. So if you do password authentication or a two-factor authentication, there is a specific way that you as a designer or developer have foreseen for this to work, so that you can use it, for example, with a phone or and the computer at the same time, or that you are able to do things in a specific way within a specific limit of time. But what happens in reality is that there is no average user in no way in anything. So people will, in reality, use any product and any security measure in different ways. And especially if you are, for example, using assistive technology, then it may not work in the same way. And if you think it's complicated, or if you have difficulties perceiving the information in the ways that are displayed on the website, if it's only visual information, for example, and you are relying on hearing, then you need to do workarounds. And this is what will happen in practice. For example, somebody who may not be able to use two-factor authentication in the intended way may ask a friend for help and then give all their security details to this friend or relative, which means that they are in fact less secure than if they would have been an accessible way of doing it in the first time. So to factor in accessibility from the start is really to have this reasonable foreseeable use, and also to be able to make sure that everybody understand the risks. And this is not only a question of whether you're using assistive technology or not, or if you have a disability and need to perceive the information in a specific way. I think all of us can agree that we have sometimes struggled with understanding instructions around security measures. There may be missing instructions. For example, if you have two-factor authentication and then you get a code on your phone, but you don't get the instruction that, oh, this code should be put into this specific field, or the instruction is only visual or only audible, then people will miss this instruction and may struggle with completing the authentication. Another very common issue is inconsistent language or instructions, meaning that there's a lot of techy words in this and jargon. And sometimes you may use the same for the same concept, you may use different words. So in one place, it could say passcode, in another password, and in the third PIN, all within the same product, all within the same authentication measure, but in different steps. And if you're not a super techy person, then it could be very difficult to understand exactly what it means. A lot of unusual words and complex language, and this goes together with the inconsistent language and instructions. There may also be information that relies only on one sense, which means that everybody else misses out on the information, and they are not really being made aware of that there is a risk, and let alone being able to understand it. Another issue can be lack of feedback on security actions. So if you started a process and you don't get the feedback that, okay, this password is fine, or the two-factor authentication has gone through. I mean, I have an example. I was just recently managing to apply the two-factor authentication on a European Union website. And first I got an error message saying that it hadn't gone through. And then I just reloaded and I didn't get any message at all. And I reloaded again. And in fact, it had gone through. But if I hadn't persisted with this, then I would have thought that it had failed. So both lack of feedback and bad feedback, you really need to support the user throughout all the steps and provide the feedback they need all the time, because not everybody is comfortable enough with technology to be able to persist even though they get strange messages. Then there are also a lot of technical issues. For example, authentication relying on one sense only. CAPTCHA is still used and it's still a bad idea, and it's not just because sometimes it's relying only on visual, there are also audio, but it's a whole process. The idea of CAPTCHA is that you redo it a lot of times until you get it right, but people who are insecure and do not really know that you can redo it without breaking things, they may lose heart and abandon the process before. Time limits are also quite common, and that is a problem for a lot of different target groups. People who need some more time to remember things and to really digest the instructions and do it one step at a time. If you have assistive technology, that takes a bit more time. If you also have a motor impairment and need to take more time to manipulate controls, all of these time limits are really putting a lot of barriers to people. The same with complex password requirements and two-factor authentication that can be and require you to do things in the different steps and remember things. It can be difficult for people with dyslexia also to see what is actually required in terms of big and small letters. When we do these surveys on cognition, we have done it for a few different studies. Password requirements and logins, it's really on the top 3 of difficulties for everybody, for persons with or without cognitive impairments. This is a really tricky one. Lastly, also controls and buttons that are visual only and difficult to manipulate is one of the issues that we can see. So the consequences of all these types of errors, if we look at the next slide, is that if you all of a sudden miss an instruction or miss the feedback that the authentication has gone through, then you may feel safe, but in fact you're not. You're stuck on the other level. And also, if you don't fully understand what are the risks, what do I need to do, then you can have a false sense of safety because you don't really know why you should be having the extra sense of security. This works both at individual level, but also on societal level, because if we do standards and if we do instructions, we think that, oh, we all have model users and they will all be average and be able to do exactly what we have instructed because we did these perfect rules. Well, if nobody is following the rules, then we think we have created a safe standardization or safe environment. But in fact, there are loopholes everywhere. And what happens is if people don't understand or are unable to access the safety measures, then they will do unsafe workarounds. That could be also getting help from a friend or putting a post-it with your password so everybody can see it. I mean, that is bound to happen, really. Or what people also are not doing is that if you need to do a security update and you don't really understand what is the risk and what will happen, and if you don't have a clear explanation of why you need to do the update, how the update is being done, and what happens afterwards, then you're just not, you don't feel safe enough to be doing the updates. There have been lots of studies of this. One of the safety companies, Kaspersky, actually saw that in the survey they did, a huge survey, more than 10,000 people, half of them delayed or were not doing updates because you're a bit unsecure and safe. You don't really know what is going to happen. So, Susanna, what is happening on the standardization part?
Thank you for giving me the really fun part to talk about. And I'm a bit surprised that you say that we are creating standards and laws, but people don't follow them. How can that be? I don't understand what you mean. So we have in the Cyber Resilience Act, and we are not experts on cybersecurity, none of us, but in the Cyber Resilience Act, one of the things that they really tried to do is to establish requirements for digital products. Obviously, that's part of what this legislation is about. And it includes products with digital elements, so both hardware and software. And the key focus here is really security by design, as Sarah mentioned, throughout the entire product life cycle. So that's kind of easy enough. And at the same time, kind of more where we are close to what is happening is the European Accessibility Act, which is or has already established accessibility requirements for certain products and services. So kind of very similar, just another strand of what is going on in the digital arena. And this includes products and services with possible security threats. That's not written in the act, but that is a fact that is many of the things, products and services that are covered in the European Accessibility Act also have security aspects to it. And the key focus of the Accessibility Act is, of course, to maximize the foreseeable use. So what happens when these two enter into force almost at the same time or are applicable at the same time? Well, there is a kind of a certain overlap or potential conflict that is, of course, important to take into consideration. And I think it's also interesting to see that the European Commission is really focusing on consumer rights and consumer products here. So that is kind of the positive part, but it becomes a little bit complex. So when we have looked into to these Cyber Resilience Act standards, we have found that accessibility and cybersecurity have kind of common and complementary approaches. So integrating key features in the design process, that is what both laws and all the standards are trying to do, security by default and accessibility by design. So that is really both things go hand in hand. And if they also work together, then will be not only a parallel development, but also the sun will rise and everyone will live happily forever after, I think. In both legal environments, there are harmonized standards being developed and created and updated and reviewed and worked on in a fast moving environment right now. A lot of work being done on both sides. And where we have found some really interesting things is when it has to do with information both to and from users. So it's actually very much, it seems like to be very technical, the cybersecurity part, but there is also a lot of human interaction and also information to and from users, and sometimes to more expert users and sometimes more consumers or everyday end users. And another way, that kind of an approach that we think both laws and all the standards try to apply at the same time is really that security and accessibility at the same time should be part of the implementation. So there are really similarities and things that are common to both ecosystems, so to speak. So what is going on right now is very exciting, at least for us, and I believe the others are thinking the same thing. So to support the European Accessibility Act, 6 standards are being developing, or really 3 standards are being reviewed and 3 standards are being created from scratch, so altogether 6 standards. There's also 1 implementing act being created by the European Commission, and the standardization organizations are also publishing a technical report, so with non-normative content to support the European Accessibility Act. And we think that's a lot, but in the Cyber Resilience Act, they are doing 15 horizontal and 25 vertical standards to support CRA. So that's 40 standards being developed at the same time. So they have even more to do than we have in the accessibility world. So as we have a little bit time left, there has been created a small group of experts from the joint technical body that is providing expert input to the standards created to support the Cyber Resilience Act. So this is what we are kind of in the middle of right now. And I personally think it's very exciting. I think those are 2 very important parts, and it's also very nice to be adding accessibility to something where you don't really know the topic, but we learn a lot, obviously, from reading those standards and kind of turning around and thinking where could the potential accessibility aspect be of this. So it has been a learning curve, I think, for both groups, but very nice exchange of expertise as well. So in essence, I think accessibility needs to be integrated in development of security features, not only the security standards, but every time anyone wants to work on security and think about security, then please think about accessibility as well, because those need to go hand in hand. Otherwise, one of them will fail, and that kind of it impacts the other part. So it's really important from both perspectives to add both the knowledge from both areas here. And interestingly enough, when we have been asked to do recommendations and write checklists and do webinars about this, we kind of end up where we always end up when it comes to accessibility. And that is, of course, to offer alternatives. So if there is a login or authentication process or approach, then provide different modes of doing that, or to provide a selection of approaches. So it's really the multimodality of accessibility again. So accessibility is about offering alternatives, and that's nothing different when it comes to security. And of course, it has a lot to do with being user-centered and testing. So the iterative process in involving persons with disabilities from the start. So the whole design for all approach thinking that is always key in accessibility is also very useful here for cybersecurity. And of course, the information. So it's not only the technical parts, but also the kind of human-computer interaction when it comes to accessible information, both in the formats you provide, making it understandable. And that's not always easy when it has to do with security, because it can contain a lot of technical words and so on, but also providing alternatives and making sure that the contact channels are either complementary or all accessible, or both. So we kind of end up in the same series of recommendations that could also apply to any other aspect of accessibility, but still need to tweak it a little bit to fit with the security measures. There is a type of shared responsibility here from both sides, I think, when working on digital products and services that contain security measures, to make sure that accessibility is not just put in one corner, but really included from the start, and also that it kind of goes horizontally across all the perspectives here. And again, also in organizations, big organizations, to exchange knowledge and experience on both security and accessibility. And interestingly enough, I don't think there are any examples of this in Europe, but in North America, I know there are companies that do security, or did security first and then added accessibility into it. So it's kind of a part of the same industry in some cases. And I think that's interesting, because it's a little bit of a similar approach to the testing and the checklists and the standards and things. So there are really similarities also in how you approach it as a consultant. So when we do this right, we can build both trust and relationships across the industries, but also to the users, of course. And the end goal, I really hope, is equal security for all. So not only that it's accessible, but that it's also the same or equal security measures for all types of users, no matter their abilities. Yes, so we can open up for questions, but we also have a little bit of marketing. If you would like to learn more, not yet about cybersecurity, because we don't have trainings on that, but we have just released our accessible e-learning platform, and we are providing now self-paced courses with a multimodal approach, with videos and audio, transcripts, captions, texts, illustrations, the lot. In a role-based approach for different topics. So we are the first batch that we are releasing are the IAAP preparation course, certification preparation courses. So I think Stefan is sharing the link in the chat, and you also have a QR code here if you want to have a look at the courses. And if nothing else, then please do subscribe to our newsletter and follow us on LinkedIn. And we have QR codes and links also for that. So do we have any questions on this topic? And please don't ask us complicated things about cybersecurity, because we cannot respond to that. Aha, thank you. Accessibility and security is a topic that is not discussed enough. I agree with that. A simple Google search returns no reliable read about this. Okay, that is, well, try Googling the Accessibility European Accessibility Act, and everything you get is wrong. So, so the question is, do you have any recommendation regarding where we can get more information about these topics? I don't really know, because I also think it's kind of under researched so far, at least, and we didn't find much when we started this, but I will ask the big brain in the company. Sarah, do you have any better?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of information that is dispersed and not fully complete, which means, like with the EA, there is a lot of misunderstandings. So I don't have a reliable source to go to. There are a few, I know there are a few governmental sort of information sites in different countries that have done packages on accessibility and security for sort of smaller parts of the whole issue, but not the whole thing. This was also something that we struggle with when we are doing the support to the cybersecurity standardization, is that we need to go on our own sources and knowledge, and there is not so much that has already been done as a good practice in other parts of the world that we can just rely on.
But maybe this is the first step to create something that could eventually end up being a reliable source. Who knows? We also got a question about actually security work now. So I think people are misunderstanding that we know more about security than we do. So the next question is, in the European Parliament, we face the same issues. Well, welcome to the club. When looking for solutions, biometrics comes into play, but adds a third concern. data protection. It's a holy trinity that needs to listen to each other. Yes, very true. So that was not really a question, but more of a comment, but I agree. It's another one. And here we have an interesting one. Is it always possible to make everything secure and accessible to everyone? Sarah, what do you think?
This is a bit of a philosophical question, because I think the different people may have different views of what is 100% accessible and what is 100% secure. So I think this is where the concept of reasonable foreseeable use comes into play. It's a bit like with universal design. You cannot foresee exactly the way that every single person will use everything in the world, but you can work with the intent that something should be as secure and as accessible as possible from the beginning. And I think if you start with that mindset of the intent and really trying to work it in by design from the start, then it's already a step in the way.
Yeah, and I really do not know cybersecurity, but I've done quite a few assignments with banks and other organizations where security is very high, and also for some different authorities with really high security. And I really think it's a matter of I don't know, dialogue between the experts, because in the beginning, the security guys, they always say, no, that's impossible. But if you try to explain why this is something is important, then sometimes they do find a way to kind of solve both problems. But I really think, just like in many other times, you need to kind of cross-reference and you need to learn from each other, because the easiest way is to say no, no, it doesn't work. And that's just like when you come to the legal people and try to teach them how to write plain language. They say, no, it has to be exactly like it is in the law. But that's not really true if you know. So I think I can't say that everything everywhere can be perfectly secure and accessible to everyone. That sounds like somebody would always find something that is difficult. But I really think it's about knowledge sharing and kind of and trying your best from both sides and not just closing the door because it's easier. So I still have hope, but that may just be because I don't know enough about security and that I'm naive. But let's kind of hope for it to be possible as much as possible, at least. So time limits in authentication or sessions are a recurring issue where I often hit a wall with clients, and the justification is security. How do you tackle these yourselves? Sarah, do you have any?
It depends on what you mean by yourselves. I don't think we have any time limits in the things that we are
I'm
producing.
guessing tackling the clients that say no. I think that is what is.
Yeah. I mean, the security, I think it comes back to what you just explained about people having a specific mindset of what security is about. And if you explain clearly why it's difficult with time limits and why it's difficult for many different groups, so that they see that it's a problem that is not only for a small part of the clients, but for everybody. I mean, that's the usual consultancy way of doing it, is to explain the business case, that if you exclude a lot of people, then it will be bad for business. So that's one way of tackling it.
Yeah, I really don't have a solution. I know that we have also banged our heads around into that wall before. So that is definitely something that we don't have a kind of a clear solution to, unfortunately. But hopefully we can find something in the future. So it's really nice that this was such a popular webinar. We had almost 400 people registered, but time is short. And now we are going to market the next Friday webinar. It's with our colleague Malin, who will talk about accessible input fields, both from a code perspective and user experience perspective, I guess. So in 2 weeks, you can learn everything about accessible input fields, which is another issue that many people stumble over, and another really important topic. So thanks for being here today. Don't forget to make something accessible before you close your computer for the weekend, and see you next time. Bye-bye.